Hi TYB, well welcome to your second snapshot video in the book of Job. Welcome to the beautiful Sydney Harbour. We decided to do the videos at night. I feel a bit like a TV presenter here sitting in front of this beautiful view. But how are you going with Job? Isn't it an incredible text? It's going to wrestle. Are you feeling the wrestle in this text? Are you feeling a little bit like, oh, there's a lot of complaining going on here? Do you know when I was studying this, I've heard a lot of sermons that says, do not sin before God when you're going through a trial and suffering because, the first chapter, 2 chapters of Job, it says, in all this, Job did not sin with what he said. You can't sin with him. I have to say, can I challenge that a little bit? Because, yes, in Job 1 to 2, he doesn't sin. But the rest of the book, people, the rest of the book is Job not sinning, but he's just having an honest and open conversation with God and with his friends saying this is not right. I love the fact that this is a beautiful open expression of this man dealing with suffering and dealing with the God perspective. Sometimes in our life, things happen that we simply do not understand, and there's a wrestle in our spirit. What are you doing, God? And Job does this wrestle well, and then God gives him his perspective. So really engage with that text. How's your friends going? Aren't your friends looking amazing compared to these guys? These guys are terrible. You must have sinned. You must have done. As I've studied this, I've gone through and had a look at the blame game of the friends. Well, it's your fault, Job, because God's righteous, and it's your fault, Job. And it's not actually his fault, because from the beginning, do you remember? He's holy and blameless before God. So it's a beautiful text. And have you felt the cyclic nature of the text? Now, that's how this literary genius, whoever wrote this book, made it. It is a poetry-based cyclic nature. What does that mean? It means the first request of Satan is one level, and then the next request is a next level. Okay, well, how about I take this off him, but now how about I actually curse his physical being? You'll feel the cyclic nature of the friends. The first friend, first friend does it, and have a look at it. We'll go through. Job speaks, and then he's got this. Eliphaz speaks, and then Job responds, and then the next friend, Bildad, speaks, and then Job responds. Can you feel this kind of, it's like an hour-and-a-half speeches going on, on all these, and Zophar speaks, and Job responds, and you've got these 3 cycles of speeches that happen, and you think after the first one, they could have said, enough, but then they go again. It does, in the middle, get a little bit hard to read, but just keep wrestling with it. Keep wrestling with what this author is trying to say. He's challenging the Israelite understanding that when somebody has suffering and trials in their life, it's not because God has left them, and it's not because they've done something wrong. Maybe we've got the wrong perspective. And I kind of love that. As I said, when I hear Christians say, well, those things are going wrong in that person's life because they sinned, I feel like slapping them across the head or telling them to read Job. Maybe it's a different perspective. Maybe you don't know what God's doing. Maybe there's a bigger picture here that you as a human simply do not understand. Don't be a friend of Job to your friends that are going through trials and sufferings. Be the one that says, no, there's a bigger picture. Now, as you've got this cyclic nature, you have these 2 points where it kind of gets quite calm, and that is chapter 28. Let's have a turn there, and then in the end, the speeches of Elihu. These random speeches of Elihu come in. If this was a play, it would be like this drama. And let me just find chapter 28. This chapter 28 is where wisdom is found, and it's kind of like a narrative reprieve where you just kind of go off and someone starts talking about wisdom and all of this beautiful wisdom of God. And then you go through, and as Job's final defense, and then in chapter 32 you have Elihu. Who is he? Why has he all of a sudden joined the conversation? He's obviously a young guy, because when he comes in, he's like, I'm young in years and you are old. That is why I was fearful. And he talks, as a young man that didn't want to say anything, but now he's going to speak up because clearly Job is sinning by saying the things that he's saying. Another great, friend of Job's. Now, what most scholars believe is possibly chapter 28, the wisdom, and the speeches of Elihu were added later, because they're different style. You can feel chapter 28 just comes in and kind of brings God into the picture. And what they feel is, some scholars believe, and you can read this in commentaries like this great commentary, Tyndale New Testament, what they feel is maybe these were actually an addition later to kind of correct the understanding and the theology of this book. And that's not to say don't read them, but just maybe read them from afar and say, okay, what is this actually saying to me? But don't you love, I don't think you've got there yet, but get to the point where God answers. And it's the Lord Speaks, chapter 38. I love this section. Do you know why I love this section? Because God is not, some people portray him as, he doesn't answer Job's question and how dare God speak down to him after all of this. Oh my gosh, know the true nature of God, people. He's not narcissistic and angry in this dictatorship that you make him out to be. He's a beautiful, loving, just God. And he steps in and he says, Job, I know you don't understand, and I know all your friends are doing a talk on behalf of God moment, but I have a voice and let me speak on my own behalf. You have no idea what's going on. You have no idea what's going on. Were you there when I created? Let me read it to you. I love it. He says, this is the first thing he says. This is like when, your dad comes in, and for me, it's like he used to say, Katie Ann Haldane, you're going to get that lecture. He says, who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you and you shall answer me. He's like, right, I've listened. I've sat back. My turn. And I kind of love this. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Stop and study this, because what God's not saying, how dare you question me? He's saying is, I'm up here, you're down there. Get my perspective. Get my bigness. He talks about the behemoth and the leviathan. And the reason he talks about these animals, because for humanity, they were these creatures that were uncontrollable. And he says, I control them. He talks about the nature of God that takes care of the small creatures. All creation comes into the circle it, highlight it, all these beautiful creation accounts of God. And he's sarcastic. I love it in one part he goes, well, of course you were there. Like, our God is so beautiful and sarcastic. I kind of laughed when I thought that, because I was like, it's that moment where God is just God. I love it. So as you read this, really adventure through this and really have a look. There's some great scriptures in that I want you to really just stop and highlight, where it says, surely God, this is in chapter 7:20, surely God does not reject one who is blameless or strengthen the hands of evildoers. And then this beautiful 13:15, though he slay me, yet I will hope in him. Sometimes we need to get that in our hearts. Though it looks like suffering is around us, though he slay me, yet I will hope in him. Yet there's a God perspective in this. Chapter 19:25, I know my Redeemer lives, and in the end, he will stand on the earth. There's these beautiful promises, but feel the cyclic nature as you finish this book. Keep going. Remember throughout the whole text, the inside scoop in the beginning that Job is holy and blameless. Have a ball in this text. Finish strong. I know that some of these, your Bible is going to be so trashed with imagery, but really this book isn't about a vengeful God. It's more about humanity wrestling with suffering, wrestling with the understanding when things go wrong, that we go to blame and sin, and God has a bigger perspective on this. So get God's perspective on your life and get God's perspective on what this book is about. Have fun in the book of Job.